Good morning. It's Wednesday, December 15th. We're glad you've joined us today. And right after you take a second to like and subscribe below, you're going to need a little more time than usual because this week we're giving you a peek at the full World Watch show. A COVID-19 vaccine is looking less effective against the Omicron variant. This, according to a preliminary study released Tuesday. South Africa's Discovery Health looked at patients with 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and included over 200,000 positive COVID-19 test results. Of these, about 40% were attributed to Omicron. Discovery Health officials said the vaccine's ability to protect against COVID-19 infection dropped drastically.
The vaccine effectiveness has reduced from 80% in the Delta wave to 33% now in this Omicron wave against COVID-19 infection. Quite a material reduction.
But the study shows that when it comes to preventing serious illness or death, the vaccine is still fairly effective.
It holds at 70% in the Omicron wave against severe complications of COVID-19, which we measure by hospital admissions.
And this protection against serious complication also applies to those with chronic illness, such as diabetes or cardiovascular disease. Pfizer's shot has been 93% effective in preventing serious illness from previous strains. Discovery Health emphasized this is preliminary data and not yet peer reviewed, but these early indications point to Omicron being more easily transmissible and vaccines not as effective in stopping its spread. Health officials are now using this information as a reason to encourage people to get their booster shot. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett made history on Monday as the country's first ever prime minister to visit the U.A.E. Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed received Bennett at his place in Abu Dhabi.
Our hand is outstretched, our people are ready, our country is ready, and our new government is ready.
The meeting came 1 year after the two countries signed the Abraham Accords, normalizing agreements between former enemies of Israel and Arab countries. Iran was at the top of the discussion agenda, as negotiations for returning to an Iranian nuclear deal are persistent threats to both the U.A.E. and Israel. The Supreme Court has decided not to block New York's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers. A group of doctors and nurses wanted religious exemptions, but the mandate only allows for medical exemptions. The group challenged the mandate in court. After a district judge stopped the mandate, the Second Court of Appeals reinstated it. The Supreme Court rejected that appellate decision, meaning that the vaccine mandate remains in effect without religious exemptions. The justices have now upheld state mandates by Indiana, Maine, and New York. Justices Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Clarence Thomas joined in dissent. Ultra-conservative Islamic lawmakers in Iran are pushing legislation that would ban pets, and it's not sitting well.
This dog plays an important role in our family.
1/4 of Iran's MPs have signed on, but there are a lot of animal lovers in Iran.
This plan is not humane at all, and I do not know the reason behind it.
Well, here's the reason. According to their interpretation of the Quran, the ministers believe keeping pets is decadent, and dogs, like pigs, are unclean. They say the practice of humans and animals living under the same roof is destructive, and having pets replaces family relationships with emotional relationships toward animals. Under the proposed law, anyone involved in the pet business, even dog walkers, would be subject to fines that are 10 to 30 times the average Iranian's monthly wage. The list of banned pets is long and includes some that you might own, like turtles, snakes, cats, rabbits, and dogs, as well as a few you might not, like crocodiles and monkeys. A last-second buzzer beater. You pull off the win by the skin of your teeth. But teeth don't actually have skin. So what are we talking about?
What in the word?
Escaping by the skin of your teeth means barely by a narrow margin. This phrase comes from the Bible. Maybe you remember the story of Job, a man who was blameless and upright, who feared God and turned away from evil. He was also a very wealthy man. God allows Satan to test Job by taking his flocks, his wealth, his children, and his health. But in all of that, Job never curses God. But he does cry out in misery. In chapter 19, he says, "All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth." That's the first written example we have of this phrase. Now, commentators have speculated whether it means the enamel on his teeth, the gums, or if it's just a poetic way of saying no space at all. But the meaning is the same. It's a very narrow margin. He's barely escaped. From the book of Job, escaping by the skin of your teeth made it into popular language. And from studying history, we can find countless examples of it. The Cold War was full of narrow escapes and close calls. In the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis, an American spy plane took off on a routine mission, but the pilot got lost in the Northern Lights and crossed into Soviet airspace. The Soviets sent up fighter jets, and the US responded by sending up some of their own. But the lost pilot managed to glide his plane back into US airspace, escaping by the skin of his teeth.
What in the word?
The announcement last week of a U.S. diplomatic boycott against China's Olympic Games was followed by similar moves by Great Britain, Canada, and Australia. One complaint against Beijing, its suppression of protesters in Hong Kong. Reporter Kayla Bailey says this is nothing new. In fact, it's been an issue for decades.
The story starts back in 1989. Citizens of Beijing, unhappy with communist rule, began protesting for political, social, and economic reforms. On June 4th, heavily armed troops pressed down on them in the Tiananmen Square and opened fire. Today, Hong Kong is the only place on Chinese soil where a mass annual vigil is held to commemorate the Tiananmen massacre. But as the Chinese government cracks down on anything deemed anti-government or pro-democracy, events like this are becoming few and far between. This peaceful candlelight vigil is the most recent victim of China's repression. This week, a Hong Kong court handed out sentences to 8 citizens for unlawful assembly during the 2020 Tiananmen vigil. Among the 8 is media tycoon Jimmy Lai. Lai is the founder of Apple Daily newspaper, shut down in June because of its pro-democracy reporting.
The reason we have to fight for it is fighting for our dignity. I think once we give up, we're giving up fighting for our freedom and democracy. We are kind of giving up our dignity as a human.
Now, we should keep in mind Hong Kong is supposed to be politically autonomous from China, meaning it doesn't function under the same communist rules as the rest of the nation. And that's because of terms agreed on when Britain handed Hong Kong over to China in 1997. Under what's known as one country, two systems, Hong Kong was supposed to enjoy 50 years of democracy. But a national security law, introduced last year by China, criminalizes what Beijing considers talk of secession, subversion, and what it calls collusion with foreign forces. Pro-democracy demonstrators in Hong Kong say the promise of 50 years of freedom is already being abandoned. The 74-year-old is currently serving a separate 14-month sentence for convictions related to 2019 protests and rallies. And he awaits trials on charges that could put him in prison for the rest of his life. Rights lawyer Chow Heng-tung was handed a sentence alongside Lai, but she encouraged others to be steadfast.
I'll have this to say to the people of Hong Kong. Keep fighting. Do not bow to any unreasonable demands. Do not conform to the telling of lies every day.
Dashing through the snow, 232 Santas. Skis and snowboards instead of reindeer. The sprightly skiing Santas taking to the hills for a cause, not a clause. For the 21st year, they've gathered in New Remain, raising money for charity while busting tricks as jolly old St. Nick's. Of course, don't mistake them with the real St. Nick. Born in what's now Turkey, Nicholas lost his parents when he was still young. His family was wealthy and he was raised a devout Christian. So he took Jesus' words to the wealthy man to heart. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Nicholas became a bishop, known for his generosity. There are many stories about St. Nick, but one leads to our tradition of hanging stockings. A poor man had 3 daughters. Back then, to get married, a woman needed a dowry, money to give the husband's family upon marriage. Without a dowry, a woman might never marry, might even be sold into slavery. On 3 occasions, it's been said, a bag of gold was tossed through a window, each landing in a stocking or shoe left by the fire, providing the needed dowries and establishing the legend of Nicholas. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'm the Big Bash. Remember, whatever the news, the purpose of the Lord will stand. We'll see you tomorrow.